Hi, I'm Chef Julia Dunaway, and today I'm going to be making some plant-based stir-fry with tofu, some Japanese rice, a good sauce, and lots of vegetables. So let's get started. I was inspired to make a stir-fry because I was reading a book, and it was about people who owned a Chinese restaurant, and they kept talking about all the stuff on their menu and all these different dishes and all the sauces, and I was thinking, oh man, I used to love to get Chinese food. But of course, plant-based, no oil Chinese food is often not very satisfying, if you know what I mean. You go there and you get it, and you think, oh, it's going to be so good, and then you get something, and it's like, if you get the regular stuff, it's so oily you can barely stand it, and if you ask for it steamed, then you get this like watery, sometimes undercooked, overcooked, tasteless, awful stuff, and it's not very good. It's not satisfying. It's not soul satisfying. So I thought, okay, I got to make something good. So I'm starting with some good vegetables. Now I know some of you don't have time for this or don't want to take the time for this, and I understand, but if you want really good stir fry, like the kind of Chinese takeout that you used to get, they use real vegetables. They don't use frozen vegetables. They don't go to Trader Joe's and get packages of cut up vegetables that have been on the shelf for a week or 2 or 10. They use real vegetables, so that's a key. Sometimes people say they make some kind of version of a stir-fried dish, and their version of it is just to get some containers of already cut up vegetables from the grocery store and throw them in the microwave and add them to rice, and they call that fried rice or stir fry, and that's not very satisfying to me if you're in the mood for something that you remember from years ago when you used to eat this kind of food. So let's make it in a way that tastes really good for today. And you may make this on a special occasion, not every day, because it's a little more involved. So we always start with things like some aromatics, and so I'm going to do it from start to finish so you can kind of see how I cut stuff up, just to make it more realistic to you. I'm going to use about half an onion. Always have some kind of a trash bowl to keep your scraps in, and you can use your scraps to make stock, or you can use them for nothing, throw them away, but it keeps them all away from your food preparation. You don't have them right in the middle of everything. So I'm going to use half of this onion because Texas onions are big. And I'm going to cut it in a couple of horizontal layers, and then I'm going to cut it in half, but not all the way through, because I'm just going to have some bigger pieces. It's not a fine dice. It's kind of like let's say there are almost like 1-inch pieces of onion, but they're not super big because I made those extra cuts, and that keeps them manageable sizes. So I've got those onions cut up. As I cut things up, I'm putting them on this platter here, and the platter just makes it easy for me to get back to them at a later time. So I'm going to cut up all these different vegetables, and then after I've done that, we can start cooking them. So it's better to cut everything up in the beginning. So for the zucchini, I'm going to cut the zucchini into half moons. So I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise, and then when I cut it in half, it automatically cuts into half moons. That looks like this. So different people will tell you different ways to cut things up. So do it the way you want to do it. This is 1 zucchini. We'll just use the whole zucchini. We don't have that many other vegetables. So for today, I'm using zucchini, eggplant, carrots, shiitake mushrooms, some bell pepper, not too much. Bell pepper can overpower things pretty fast. And I picked some Chinese cabbage from the garden, but I didn't really have very much, so there's not much there, just a few outer leaves. It still hasn't grown into a complete Chinese cabbage yet, but it's getting there, and it was nice and fresh looking. So I'm going to have a couple of these sides of my bell pepper, and I want this to be kind of small, thin matchstick pieces, because I don't want to bite into giant pieces of bell pepper. So those are going to be a little bit small matchstick pieces. So I'm going to cut them in like this into these strips, and then I'm going to cut the strips in half so that they're not so big. And if you want them even smaller, you can cut them smaller. It just depends on the size you like of things. You can even cut them into cubes if you wanted to. I've done that before. But I think for today, I'm just going to cut them into these matchstick pieces, which in my case, they're not going to be 2 inches long. They're going to be like 1 inch long, and they're on the thinner side. So I'm going to just take them, rotate them, and then I'm just going to cut them in half. And I like that size, but like I said, you know, whatever size you like. And then I'm putting them all in their little separate areas on my tray. And like I said, I have some carrots. Same thing with the carrots on the half moon shape. I'm cutting the ends off. And the carrots, these are not really big carrots. These are kind of skinny carrots. So I'm going to cut them in half lengthwise. And, you know, a lot of people will say, well, cut them into planks and then cut the planks into matchstick pieces. Well, these carrots are so, they're not very big. I get those ones that still have the tops attached, and they tend to be small, skinny carrots. They don't lend themselves very well to be cut into planks. So that's why I prefer kind of the half moon shape, because you can see the little half moon shape is not very big. But if you have some mammoth carrots that are gigantic, then you might want to rethink that and cut your carrots in smaller pieces, because you don't want them to take forever to cook. So, you know, cutting doesn't have to be, everybody doesn't have to do it the same way. You can read a whole book on, you know, how to cut up your vegetables. Okay, I have my eggplant. This is a Japanese Ichiban eggplant from the garden, my garden. And I'm going to cut it into half moon shapes. And these things are very tender, so they don't take very long to cook. They, not like the traditional eggplants that people will say soak in salt water and do a bunch of stuff to, because if you don't, then it takes forever to cook and they'll be really tough. Well, these Ichiban eggplants, the Asian eggplants, seem to cook a lot faster, so I'm not doing any special preparation to them. I'm not putting salt on them, and it's just one. And I'm cooking that mainly because I have them growing in my garden. If you don't want to use Japanese eggplants, don't use them. You can use anything you want. You could use yellow squash, but I think these things all have good character. And I'm using one jalapeno from the garden. Remember I said I went out and picked stuff from my garden, and that's why I'm using certain things, but I also like spicy things. So I'm gonna put the peppers here. I'll probably put them in when I put in the onions. And whatever else I can put in here is some shiitake mushrooms. And the shiitake mushrooms, you have to take the stems off. I've already washed these, so they're washed. I'm gonna take all the stems off all the way. So all you have is a cap. These are not like button mushrooms or white mushrooms where you can eat the stems. These stems are super, super tough. They're not edible. So we'll take all the stems off, get them out of the way, and then we can cut the tops, and we're just gonna cut the tops into strips. And we can take 2 at a time and do that. It makes it faster. And you don't want them to be too skinny, because then they'll kind of melt away. So they're like, you know, 1/4 inch strips. If you can't get shiitake mushrooms, cremini mushrooms are really good, or white mushrooms, any kind of mushrooms. Mushrooms are great to eat because mushrooms are part of the, you know, if you follow Dr. Furman, he talks about G-bombs, garlic, berries, onions, mushrooms, beans, I think is the other one. So, but you know, he talks about eat a lot of mushrooms, eat mushrooms. So mushrooms are great, eat them. And here's my Chinese cabbage, just a few leaves. You know, a lot of stir-fry recipes will say have you use bok choy or some kind of green. So this Chinese cabbage is really young and tender, so I'm using it today. But you know, if you don't have Chinese cabbage, like I said, use another green. You can use spinach. You can buy, I'm trying to think of some other greens that people get. Mainly bok choy, Napa cabbage. Oh, you could put in stuff like asparagus, but whatever you like. Stir fry vegetables can be just about anything. And so I've kind of got everything on my platter here. And then I'm going to go on to the next step, which is to get some garlic and ginger going. And we're going to be adding that with our onions. So in just a minute, I'm going to do that. All right, I've got my pan. I'm going to have 2. I've got, move my camera over here a little bit more. Okay, I've got one over on my big burner over here. And then I've got another one. I'm going to turn them on at a medium heat. Got another one on this burner. And why am I doing 2 pans? Well, I'll show you in just a minute. It will make sense. So first of all, I'm going to get some of my garlic and ginger started. So I've got just some garlic, some ginger, and I'm not going to grate it for this. I'm going to just cut it, mince it into small pieces. See, I didn't even bring in my grater. I'll probably have to get it for my sauce, but I thought I had it. It's hard to remember everything to bring in for your cooking demos. Okay, but I'm just going to cut my ginger into really tiny little minced pieces for this. I want about a tablespoon of ginger. And the reason for that is it just tastes better in the stir fry when it's in little minced pieces instead of grated. I've tried it both ways, and I just like it better when you can actually taste the piece of ginger. In the saute part now, in the sauce, I'm going to be grating the ginger that goes in the sauce because we kind of want it to disappear in the sauce. But in the actual stir fry, we're cutting it up. So you can see I just kind of peeled the edges and I'm cutting it up, and I've got my little pile. It's probably about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. So if it's more than that, take a little bit out because more is not better with ginger. Too much ginger can be a little bit overpowering, okay? So don't think, oh, well, I like ginger. I'm just going to put a bunch in there because trust me, I've had friends that say they love ginger and they kind of overdo it on the ginger. And then all you taste is ginger. So don't do that. Okay, so I got my ginger. I've got a giant clove of garlic. We could put a little more garlic than this 1 clove. So I'm going to get 1 more clove. So we'll have 2 big cloves of garlic. This garlic is some kind of really good purple garlic I got at the Santa Fe Farmers Market. And I sure wish I could be transported back there and get another 7 or 8 heads of this garlic because I'm almost used all of it. And it's just wonderful. Really nice, mellow taste. And I'm growing a bunch of garlic this year in the garden because got some garlic peel here. There's nothing like really fresh garlic. That makes a dish. And homegrown garlic tastes so much better. Sometimes you get the grocery store garlic and it's already going a little bit. And it's got sprouting, green sprouting in the middle, and it's just not that good. So grow your own garlic if you can. So I'm just mincing up the garlic real small. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we want it small. And do not use a garlic press. That's my pet peeve, is people will get out their garlic press and it smashes the garlic up and changes the texture of it. It's not that good. So don't use a garlic press, please. Okay, so got that. My pan's nice and warm, which is what I was hoping for. And I'm going to throw in those onions. Remember the onions? And this is what you want to hear. You want to hear a nice sizzle. You don't want to start with a cold pan. You want to start with a nice medium high heat pan and get some color on your onions. We'll go ahead and throw in that jalapeno pepper and get that going too. So first we want to get the onions in here, and I can use my chopsticks. Isn't that authentic? This piece is way too big. Who cut that? That would not get a good grade if somebody were grading me. It's got like the core in there. Put this in there. Oh, look, a couple of peppers snuck in there. We'll get them out. All right, so I've got my onions, little jalapeno peppers in here. And now, that one fell out. I've got it on a nice heat, but it's a little high, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit. It's a little too hot. Then I could add some of my ginger, like I said, about a tablespoon. I don't want to add too much, so I'll have extra here. And then I'm going to add all this garlic because I know that my garlic is really mellow. If you have really strong, super strong garlic, maybe you don't want to add quite that much. So now I see that garlic is starting to stick to my pan. And I don't want to burn this garlic and ginger, so I've got some vegetable broth standing by. I'm going to put a couple spoonfuls in there. And you see now how it's gonna, start to bubble up a little bit, and it'll cook the onions and the peppers and the ginger and the garlic with that nice vegetable broth. So we can't really, when we're cooking whole food plant-based no oil, it's hard for us to follow traditional stir-fry recipes because they always tell you to start with oil. They'll say start with 2 tablespoons of neutral oil or something. And, and then with plant-based no oil, it would say, well, start with broth. Well, I never start with the broth. I start with the vegetable like onions. And then after the onions start to get a little light brown, then I add a little broth. And then you develop the flavor that you're after. Okay, so we're gonna let this cook for a while. We need to give this time to cook, but in the meantime, we could be cooking some other vegetables in this other pan over here. So I'm gonna take some of the hard vegetables that I know take a while, like I know the eggplant's gonna take a few minutes, and the carrots, and I think I'll put my zucchini in here. And I'm going to go ahead and add the bell peppers to the onions because I think peppers and onions go together pretty well, don't you? So we'll put the eggplant, the carrots, and the bell peppers are going to go in with the onions. They don't take as long. The onions take a little bit longer because, they're onions. We want to kind of cook down some of that acrid bitterness of the onion. Okay, so I'm going to get my zucchini, which is in this corner, throw it in with this batch here. So what we have to do when we're doing our plant-based no oil thing is figure out a way to make our stir fry and cook the vegetables so they're done, but they're not overcooked and they're not undercooked. Well, that's hard. You can't just dump them all in together. We still have mushrooms and Chinese cabbage. You can't really dump everything together in one pan. I used to try to do that. That was my kind of classic method, was to put everything in one pan and cook it all at the same time. And, that worked okay, but you can't get a lot. You can't make much because if you overcrowd your pan, then nothing cooks well. So then, what are some other ways you can do this? Well, another way to do it is like this. You use 2 pans and don't cook everything at once. That way, whatever you cook gets done very nicely, and then you take it out when it's done and add something else. So we're going to do this in stages. I'm going to cover this up for a minute because that way it'll get done. And then as things get done, I have a bowl standing by, and I will put them in this bowl. And at the end, I'll combine everything together. So over here, I've got my zucchini, eggplant, and carrots, and those are hard vegetables. They're going to take a little bit longer. So I've kind of got a little color on them. They're kind of light brown. It didn't take that long. I'll let them cook just a little bit longer before I think about putting the lid on. See, I've got a nice hot pan. It's about medium high, and that's what you want. That's how you're going to get some flavor out of your vegetables, is to have some heat on your pan so something can happen. Don't be afraid to use heat when you're cooking. I know that sounds weird, but in my experience with people, oftentimes people are afraid to turn things up high. They've been told, to cook everything on low. I don't know why, but that's a common thing. So now I'm going to add a little bit more of my stock. I'm getting kind of low on stock. So I'll add a little bit more. This is just some vegetable stock I like. Now I'm going to put the lid on this pan and let it cook for a couple of minutes. So everything may take 3, 4, 5 minutes to really cook. You don't want to be in a big hurry. So now we go back to the onions and the ginger and the garlic. And they're getting nice and soft, but we don't want things to get overcooked because it's stir fry. We want things to have a little bit of a bite. So our bell pepper still has a little bit of a bite. I know the onions are soft, so we don't want to keep going with this and get to a point where we have, overcooked vegetables. So I'm going to take these peppers and onions and garlic, ginger out of my pan, and then I can just set this aside because this part's done. Now I can get my mushrooms in this pan. Oh, there's a stray pepper. So I'll get my mushrooms in this pan. I'll save the Chinese cabbage for last because it's really young and tender. and then I'll put it in at the end because it'll be fine. And if you have any stray vegetables that you didn't get in before that got mixed in, just add them. It's not nobody's going to be grading you on this. The whole point of this is we want to cook our vegetables in batches, like cook 2 or 3 types of vegetables together in a single layer in your skillet. We can't really use a wok when we're cooking whole food, plant-based, no oil, stir fry. It really doesn't work very well because the whole idea of the wok is to have the oil and then you shake the food around and coat it with the oil and cook it on super high heat and get it cooked. And that doesn't work when you're cooking with nothing. It just doesn't work. Trust me, I've tried it. If you can figure out a way to do it, let me know. All right, so now I've got my zucchini and carrots. How am I going to know if they're the right doneness? Well, I just have to take one out and test it. They're kind of hard to get with my chopsticks. Oh, perfect. Like I said, I don't want overcooked vegetables, so I want to get it out before it gets to that point. So now I've got my zucchini, carrots, and eggplant, which are all nice and done. I need a better tool than this. Get my palms. And then I have my pan is ready. I could cook the Chinese cabbage in this pan because it's empty now. So now I've got the nice zucchini, the bell peppers, the onions, the garlic, the ginger. I've got my mushrooms over here, which now that they've browned lightly, I can add a little bit of my vegetable stock, a little bit more than that. And then I'm going to cover them so they'll cook. Now I'm going to add, it's like a dance, I'm back and forth, back and forth. Now I'm going to add my Chinese cabbage to this pan. That's the last vegetable. So that didn't take that long. I'm just going back and forth. Now, is all this necessary? Do you have to do all this to have a good stir fry? Well, the reason for doing all this is because if you want to make a batch big enough that you can eat it for a meal and have leftovers, then you want to make quite a bit. You don't want to just make one layer in your skillet. So that's kind of why I started using this method. It was because it made more sense and I could have extra. Because my son, Glenn, has been eating plant-based. And so when I make stuff, I kind of want to make enough for me to have it 1 or 2 meals, sometimes my husband, some for my son. So I kind of have to, figure out a way to make more at one time. And this is a good way to do it. So I've got my Chinese cabbage over here in that pan. The mushrooms are doing well. They need a little bit longer. I'm going to put a little broth in with the Chinese cabbage. So that will wilt. And I'll put it on low and let those cook down. And then when this is done and that's done, I'm going to put all the vegetables together and move on to the next step. Okay, everything is done. All right, everything is ready now to put together with the sauce. So remember, I had the mushrooms, they're done. Now I'm adding the other cooked vegetables that I had set aside in my bowl. And then I have my little pan with some of my cabbage from the garden. Remember, I didn't have a lot, but I have some Chinese cabbage. In case you're wondering what's behind me, I've got the boxers. My cooking companions, you probably can see Jiro. Come here, Jiro. What you doing? There's Jiro. Cammy, look. You can't see Cammy. There's Cammy. There's the baby Cammy. I've dropped some carrots on the floor, and they're like, give me those carrots. Wash my hands. All right, so I've combined all these different vegetables. Look how many there are. We could not have cooked all those in the pan at the same time. It would have been a big disaster. So that's why doing this method works so nicely. So now let's make our sauce. I've been working on grating some ginger. So I grated it on my little zester And then you just kind of slap it. And then you get out your amount, which I'm looking for about 2 teaspoons. That's about right. And I'm going to do the same thing with my garlic. I basically just kind of rub it on here because we're not putting this in the food processor. So we basically want it to be, grating it makes it work well in the sauce. Like I said, I didn't want to grate it for the stir fry part, but grating it for the sauce works really well. Because then you don't get great big chunks of garlic and ginger in your sauce, which I think is good. So we get that going. And see, look, I'm getting all this nice garlic. One more garlic clove. And then we'll put the other ingredients in. That garlic clove is kind of falling apart, so I think we have enough. I don't want to spend all day messing with garlic, but 2 or 3 garlic cloves works fine. Then the rest of the ingredients are soy sauce. Now, this is something that can be modified based on your taste. I'm putting 4 tablespoons, and this is enough for 4 servings. If you don't want to use that much, use less. Use half that much. You could use even less than half that much. It's up to you. Or you could use coconut aminos. This is a ½ cup of my vegetable broth. And then I'm going to put a tablespoon of tahini in here. I'm just going to eyeball it because I kind of know what a tablespoon looks like. And that's because most of the recipes call for sesame oil. So I'm using tahini. And then the other thing is I'm using about a tablespoon, eyeballing it, of date syrup. Because a lot of Chinese stir-fry recipes will call for hoisin sauce. And hoisin sauce, I don't like the taste of it. It's got, to me, kind of an odd taste I don't like. So I never use it, never did before, but I'm sure it'd be hard to find a version that's plant-based, no oil, whatever. So I just use date syrup. Okay, and then I'm going to put in a ½ of the tablespoon of, this is a reduced sodium white miso. So I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to use a teaspoon of red chili flakes. And I'm just going to eyeball that with my palm. That's my measuring spoon. It doesn't have to be exact, but you know, just whatever red chili flakes are suitable to your taste. I know that I like it a little spicy, but not crazy spicy. And then last but not least, we'll put in about ½ a tablespoon of cornstarch. So you don't want to overdo the cornstarch because your sauce will get too thick. But a little bit of cornstarch will make the sauce become a sauce. It'll have a nice consistency. And then we're going to shake this up. That's the way to do it. Now, could we put it in our Ninja, Ninja, or blender? Yeah, but it's better not to. I don't know why, but when I've made it and stuck it in the blender, it's like it overblends it, and I don't like the way that it turns out. So the only thing I have to make sure is that the miso, see, my miso was still kind of lumpy in there, so that's why I'm using my spatula to make sure that my miso gets in there and is dissolved. And so now the miso is dissolved because I kind of, hit it with my spatula. So my sauce is ready. So I got this beautiful sauce, got my vegetables, and I'll get the heat turned back on. So that's what you do. You cook all your vegetables. You should have your sauce ready, really, not wait until, 5 minutes later. But, okay, so, while your vegetables are still hot, if you made your sauce first, you'd have it ready. And start with about ½ a cup of sauce. Don't use all the sauce. You may not need all of it. So I'm going to use about half of this sauce. And we can always put more in there later if we think we need to. Yeah, I'll probably put a little bit more in there. And then we just want to get all this heated through. That's all we have to do. We don't have to do much more because the vegetables have already developed a lot of flavor. And we didn't have to put any seasoning on the vegetables because they taste like vegetables. They taste like how vegetables are supposed to taste, which is just good. All right, I'll put more sauce in there. And we could save this for another time. Or if you have somebody like my husband eating, he wants tons of sauce and everything. But what I like to do is save the extra sauce, and that way, when you want to have leftovers tomorrow, you have sauce that you can add to your leftovers to reheat it. Okay, and then the other thing that goes in this is a tofu. So I've already got it made. This would be a really long video if we had to make the tofu also. This is Sesame Ginger Tofu. That recipe will be included in the show notes. I've made it a million times for you on other videos, but I cut it into really little cubes. So, you know, it's tiny little cubes, and I just cook this in the oven at 400 for about 25 minutes. And this is a great thing to put on your stir fry because it's chewy and meaty and very satisfying feel when you eat it, because it's like you get the sensation that you might have gotten back when you were eating non-plant-based, maybe. You know, I hate to use the word meaty, but that's how my husband describes it. He says, oh, you know, I like that the tofu is real meaty, because it, you know, it reminds him of a hearty meal. So usually the men tend to like the tofu dishes because they like the sensation of chewing on something. So how much do we add? And when do we add it? I like to add the tofu at the very end because I don't want it to get soggy. So I use it on the top. And then it doesn't have to even get warm. You know, usually the tofu's out of the oven. So, but you can, you know, mix some of the hot sauce on it and heat it through, heat it some more, but mine is still warm from the oven, so I just stuck it in there. So now all we have left to do is plate it and garnish it. So what I'm going to do is over here on this side, I have my rice cooker, my Japanese rice cooker. I'm going to get a nice portion of Japanese rice. And yes, this is white Japanese rice. It's like a sushi rice. And I usually eat brown rice, but occasionally I enjoy Japanese rice, like the kind that my mother made for us growing up. So, you know, I know some people would probably not approve of that. I don't care. Occasionally I eat white Japanese rice, and I love it. And I enjoy it that much more because I don't eat it that often. So I'm putting all my beautiful stir-fried vegetables, and I'm piling it on because these are just a bunch of vegetables. And there's a lot of them, so you get the volume. I will put some of the tofu on top because I just like the way it looks. And then last but not least, it'd be nice if my cutting board wasn't full of stuff, wouldn't it? Last but not least, I can put some toppings on here, some garnish. So what do you use for garnish? We can put something as simple as scallions. Scallions are really good. And I have some chopped roasted peanuts. Hey, guys, come here. A little cilantro, just some cilantro leaves, just a few. And I have some Fresno chilies. I think they're pretty, they're from the garden. And some sriracha. You don't have to use sriracha. I don't put soy sauce on my food just because I don't find it necessary to put soy sauce on it. You know, my husband, he would be putting soy sauce all over this. So on the table would be the low sodium soy sauce, and he would drizzle it on top. But we don't have to do that. And then that's it. And we have this super delicious, piping hot, perfectly cooked Chinese takeout stir fry with tons of vegetables, tofu, a really good sauce, a little heat, and this will satisfy your cravings. And you can adjust it up and down. You can, you know, if it's too high in sodium for you, dial back on all the soy sauce parts. Use more light vegetable broth. All you need is some liquid. You could use basically water and put, you know, some flavored water in here with some spices, with ginger and garlic and water. You don't even need any of the other stuff. So you can customize it and make it suitable for you. I don't mind using some low sodium soy sauce. I haven't stopped using that. Hasn't bothered me, but then again, I don't overdo it. And I enjoy my food. So I hope you make this plant-based, no oil stir fry with the tofu and all the vegetables and the really good sauce and good toppings. make it for a special occasion and just enjoy it. So subscribe to my channel if you want to. I'll try to do recipes every week of the whole food plant-based no oil dishes that I enjoy. Sorry about my dogs over there. I'm here alone and they're making a lot of noise today. So thanks for watching, everybody, and bye-bye for now.